Hi, and welcome to Creative Quo. I'm Dana, and my guest today is Alan Coulter. Hi, Alan.
Hi there, Dana. Good to
How
see
are
you
you
again.
doing? It's so
Good.
good to see you.
Same here. Same here. No, I'm good. Just as I say, I was just coming off a new series that, it's in the process of being shot with the lead is Liev Schreiber and the guest artist for for the entire, I don't know, series, certainly the first season is Stephen Graham. So, who's a wonderful actor and was won the Emmys for Adolescence and so on. So so I'm just coming back from that. I'm not quite through. I have to go back for a couple of days and shoot. So I'm home, relaxing and trying not to think about having to go back.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to spend
Sure,
your off time with me.
sure, my
I
pleasure.
start us off with asking people their kind of origin stories, like what led them to their craft. So, what led you to filmmaking?
Well, it's funny. I I think I was very young, and
Mhm.
my early 20s, and there was. I remember obviously seeing 2001 and thinking, I had probably a little bit like you. I had an interest in all different kinds of the arts, from uh, painting to photography to drama. I had been an actor in high school and had won a bunch of awards and stuff. And but I didn't really know how to put it all together. And then when I remember reading an article about 2001 and seeing it and thinking, well, there's an art form that kind of includes all those things.
Mm.
And so it really was like an epiphany. I always say that if you had told me that I was going to take the advice of a 22-year-old guy, I'd say no way. But that's what I did. And it was my advice to myself. Why don't you do this? So uh, so I ended up doing it, and here I am. After all this time. So um,
How did you get your start? So from that epiphany moment when you were like, okay, I figured I want to do something that encompasses everything I love to actually making your first project.
well, let's see. I when I was in the theater department at University of Texas, and when I graduated, by the way, it's noteworthy that I made a D in directing because this professor had this idea that I should attend class, and so I was penalized for not showing up. So, um, but but anyway, so when I moved to New York, and I really started at the bottom. I moved to New York. I had no connections. I did not want to go to Hollywood. It was just didn't interest me. I thought Hollywood was just like a more glamorous version of Texas. So I, uh, yeah, I moved to New York and looked in the New York Times and got a job as a messenger for a small film company. And so I started at the bottom. I started by delivering cans of film back in the day when that's what one did to various labs. And from there, I sort of weaseled my way into the editing room where I was apprentice editor and then an assistant editor. And then somehow I managed to get a job as a second editor on a feature length documentary, which I was not qualified for. But I did the graveyard shift, I would start at 6 p.m. and I would work till midnight. And if I didn't finish my work, they locked the building at midnight. So even if I finished at 12:01, I was stuck in this building on West 46th Street until 6 a.m. And so it was a kind of a grim job, but I did that. And then I started getting calls from people I had met in the summer theater, and somebody was working on a low budget feature, and would I come and work as a production assistant? And I did, and that kind of led to some other jobs like that. And what I did, which may sound familiar too, is that I sort of at a certain point after a few years of kind of just scraping by and doing one job after another I went to Scotland with a guy I met to help him make a documentary about a fire festival he had witnessed as a child, and so it was a real checkerboard early career. I mean, and I've sort of followed advice that I've given to others, which is, in this case, again, coming from my own advice to myself, which was just do anything that happens. Just say yes to everything. And that's kind
Mhm.
of what I did. I was a production assistant. I was a fourth grip, or whatever that would mean. Like helping on a low budget feature. I became an additional AD on another low budget feature, and sort of began to meet some people over time. And at a certain point, after a few years, I decided to make a short, and so I wrote this script, which didn't turn out to be that short. It was like 44 minutes. It could have, if I made it now, I'd make it 30. But anyway, I didn't. Didn't take. Uh, I didn't listen to anybody, so I made that link. But that film was this was in the days of where film festivals were really a big deal. I guess they still are. I haven't really followed, but it got into a bunch of film festivals. It got into there used to be a film festival in LA called FilmX, and there was the Atlanta Film Festival, the Chicago Film Festival, and there was a festival of shorts in Lille, France, and it got into all these festivals, and as a result, um, I was eventually, I guess, approached by the Whitney Museum was showing films, independent films at that time, and it was a kind of a pseudo noir film. It was kind of a detective film, but the called the Hobbs case. But the fact was that Joe Hobbs was the central character, so it was really a mystery about this guy who develops these ideas that he's witnessed a crime, and it's just a paranoid mystery. But it's all treated as if he really believes these clues that he's finding, and nothing's going on. So it's a story of this guy who uh, is treated like a straight mystery, but little by little you realize that this guy is not with it. And so I made that film, and it was shown at the Whitney, and then Museum of Modern Art got wind of it, and they had a thing they called Cineprobe, and so it was shown there, and then it ended up at the Cinémathèque Française and in Paris, and shown there, and then curiously, then I sent it to a bunch of agents in LA, and nobody was interested because it wasn't just right down the middle of the. It wasn't a completely straight film, and it wasn't really a short. It wasn't really a feature. So I was kind of stymied, and as a result, I met a guy who was about to start directing commercials, and so he asked if I would come and produce them, and that was the first time I'd really made a living. And so I
Mm. Mhm.
and that the advantage of that, I try not to be too long-winded, but unfortunately, you asked, so I'm going to have. so, but so I did a. So he asked you. It's the funniest interview. Um, just a guy I'd met socially, and we got along. And he asked to see the film, and I showed it to him, and he said, "Well, would you come in and interview to see if you wanted to produce these commercials for me?" Because he was not an experienced director; he directed a couple while he was at an ad agency, and he had been asked to join this company at that time, a very big commercial director named Bob Giraldi. So he was going to start, being a director in that under that umbrella. So I went in for the interview, but unfortunately, the night before the interview, I went to a birthday party for someone, and I got smashingly drunk. And so I I showed up at the interview completely hungover. I mean, just
No.
so. So we met in this little office, I remember, and I came in and I saw a little sofa there. I said, "Look, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm going to have to lie down." So uh, uh, I lay down on the couch, and would close my eyes, and he sort of said, "Well, you've produced before, so you'll figure it out." It was a very casual interview, and I said, "Well, I've
Yeah.
never done this before." He said, "Yeah, you'll figure it out. Don't worry about it." And he said, you're going to be there just to kind of put things together for me, and that's it." So I said, "Okay," and I shook his hand, and I left. I went home and went to bed. So the next day I started producing commercials, and that went on for quite a number of years, longer than it probably should have. But it was a great time for me in the sense that I didn't really, unlike many of the directors whose names you would know, all of them probably,
Mm.
I didn't have a great deal of, I had, I suppose, chutzpah, but not a lot of self-confidence. I didn't really know anything about production. I hadn't been to film school or anything. I made the film. I remember making the film and inventing filmmaking. I would say to somebody, why don't you take a camera and go out and photograph a bunch of houses like this, And
Yeah.
then I'll look at those pictures. I was inventing location scouting, and then I'll look at them and, and I'll decide, I didn't know any of that stuff. So I recorded a lot of the sound effects in the basement. I would watch the film on it wasn't even a movie. It wasn't a moviola. Can't remember which one it was, but one of the later issues of
Like a steam pack or
it
something?
was
Was
it
it
was
the
Steenbeck probably, and I
Yeah.
would watch it, and I would watch the character walking, and I would count the steps in rhythm to him, and then I would go to my basement, and I would record myself walking in the basement. Anyway, so I was
You do
inventing.
Foley work?
I did my Foley work. I did my own Foley work, and it was really, I didn't even know the word Foley at that time. So I basically made this film. A woman I had met who was an editor, she cut it, and so anyway, it did very well, but as I say, it didn't get me an agent. So I went through this whole long period when I was producing commercials, and curiously, a guy who was an assistant director on that, uh, the saw my film, and said, "Well, look, I'm doing a series called Tales from the Dark Side, which was like a third-rate Twilight Zone." So he said, "Would you come and do one? It's non-union." I said, "Okay." So I did that, and they asked me to do another one, and they kept saying, "Well, why don't you stay on and do another?" They did another series called Monsters, and I did a few of those. And then those guys, the guys that were producing that, went on to do New York Undercover. So they asked me to come over there, and I wasn't in the union. So they said, "Why don't you shoot the title sequences?" And by that time, I'd started directing music videos. I said, okay. So I started doing that, and I did that. I'm trying to, this is the Reader's Digest version. This could take much longer if I didn't shorten it. So I did I started doing I did the title sequences, which was kind of a setup of the story and played to some well-known musician at the time. And so I did that, and eventually I helped out the executive producer because he was trying to direct an episode, and it was obvious he was lost, and he asked me to come and help. And so I stepped in, and uh, they got in a little trouble because I was not in the union, and I was really directing major sequences, with the leads. So I had to go off and I ended up having to leave and do a couple of science shows for kids, and that got me into hilarious because two things I knew nothing about, kids and science. So I went off and did a couple of those, got in the union, and then I came back, and then they gave me an episode, and suddenly everything opened up. But this was a long. I say always when I teach a class, I always say they had to build extra runway to launch my career, and it's true. It took a long time to get off the ground, but once I
Yeah.
did, it went quickly. So anyway, so
How many
believe me,
years
that's
was
the short version. What's that?
Wow, how many years was that from, like, doing that short film to getting into the union?
Oh, at least 10 years.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, because I was just laboring in commercial land, and
Yeah.
they wanted me to direct commercials. They were trying to, and I was afraid to because in those days, if you directed commercials, you were labeled a commercial director, and you would never break out of that. So I turned that down multiple times. I ended up doing a couple, but so and as I say, I was probably longer. I was comfortable. I was making a nice living, you know, uh, getting by, and and I didn't know how to take the next step. I'd had an agent take me on, and she couldn't do anything.
Mm.
It was sort of a little bit of a blind alley until met this AD who said, "Well, why don't you do this series?" And that opened the door. I mean, once I did Tales from the Dark Side, there was no turning back because then there was a natural path.
And that's what really opened you up to, like, really start becoming a director. Like, you were like,
Yeah,
"This"
it is, and yeah, it is. I mean, I did Tales from the Dark Side, as I say, and Monsters, and then they did another short-lived series called Stephen King's Golden Years, which was actually a primetime show, weirdly non-union, shot in North Carolina, and and then I really got lucky because I still didn't have an agent, and then one night I was directing a music video, and I got a call from some guy out of the blue. It kept hearing my name. He would left the business and then come back into the business and said, "I'm looking for clients. I'm in from LA, and I keep hearing your name." So that was very lucky because even though I wasn't directing episodes, somehow whatever I was doing was impressing people. So I met with him. I thought he was completely nuts. He told me a bunch of bullshit. I thought, about, you know, what he was going to do for me. And, if I signed with him, and I said, "Oh, yeah, okay." He later told me I was the most skeptical client he'd ever met. But anyway, so I was
Did
still
he
doing
accept
the
Did he deliver on his promises?
He delivered on everything he said, and I
Okay.
stayed with him. I've stayed with him until he left the business. I was with him like 20 plus years. So, no, he was great. He was actually going to be an agent at what was then a very well regarded boutique agency with a name that very hard to remember. Broder, Curlin, Webb and Uffner sounds like a law firm, but they were very
Mm,
well regarded. And I actually called a friend of mine. I said, "I just met with this guy. He's from this agency. He says, he wants to represent me. Call your agent," because she had one, and see if they're any good. And she did. She came back. She said, "Run, don't walk to join that agency. They're like hot shit." So I joined with him, and I was still doing commercials, and I was directing those. I wasn't even in the union yet. And after the first year of doing those title sequences, I went to him. I said, "Look, I owe you some money. I made a pretty decent change." And he said, "No, it's okay." He said, "When you get a full episode, then we'll talk." So he wouldn't even accept money, which is in the world of agents is
yeah,
uh,
that's
it's
rare.
a it's seditious. I'm surprised they didn't kick him out. But then he stuck around, and then my career in network television was very brief. It was a few years, but as those go,
Mhm,
because of The Sopranos. I mean, I did a couple of shows that were okay, and then I did a show called Millennium, which was a spinoff from X Files, and then I did X Files, and at that time, the X Files was kind of the premier television you could do.
yeah,
And so I did X Files, and then I was sent a bunch of shows for the new season. They said, we're interested, not pilots, but looked like promising shows. And I even agreed to do one. And then I saw a pilot for this that they called The Sopranos, which was out of the blue. It came to me, and that's what changed everything. Really, to go to your bigger question, how did I
yeah,
break in? When I saw that, I said, "Get me a meeting with this guy." He was, because show was going to shoot in New York, and I thought the pilot was sensational. And
yeah,
so I had a meeting with David Chase, and we just hit it off. I mean, it was just, I mean, I didn't have nearly the credits of other people he was talking to, but we hit it off.
mhm,
I remember going in, and everybody was saying, everybody was walking on eggshells. Everybody, he's in a terrible mood, and I was like, I didn't know the guy, so I didn't care. Went in, and like in 5 minutes, we were laughing our asses off. So he gave me an episode that was called College, and I directed the episode that many can feel is one of the it's the episode that David has said told him what the series could be, and
really?
so that was a really fortunate. It was very fortuitous. So I did the college episode, and he came on the set after about the fourth day I was shooting, I guess, and he came on location. He said, "I've seen the dailies. You get it. I want you to stay on as a producing director, and I've got one more episode you can do." And after
Yeah,
that, the next year, he said you can direct as many as you want. And so I just I would tend to do the first episode and then several after that. And that went on for 3 seasons. Then the fourth season, by that time, I'd kind of got tired of him, uh, staring over my shoulder all the time. And so I didn't want to go back. And so I was not going to. And then we had dinner, and he and his wife and me and my wife. And he did the unimaginable, which is he apologized. It's like the mob boss apologizing, So Um, I mean, it was kind of filled with various caveats, but it was nice enough that I said, okay, I'll come back. And I did a couple more on the fourth season, and the fifth season I did maybe, I can't remember, one or two. And then I by that time I was doing pilots, which is kind of what I've been doing pretty much since then.
so in Sopranos, how many episodes in total did you direct?
I should have studied up on that. I think it's around 12 or 13, I think, somewhere in
See.
there, I think. Yeah, I believe so. I think the only person that did more was my good friend, who I'm actually working with on this new series, Tim Van Patten. And Tim took over what I was doing. I had actually on Sex and the City, they had asked HBO had asked me to kind of the second season, would I come in and try to find a style for the show, because after the first season it was kind of lost, and they changed the writers, and that was a big deal, and they wanted me to kind of give it some kind of visual feeling or something, because it was pretty flat. And so I remember doing the first four of season two. I think they aired it one, two, three, and five or something like that. But I did the first four, and so they wanted me to keep coming back. And I went back a few seasons, did a few episodes, but it wasn't my sort of thing. So, and ultimately Tim kind of took on that role and became the guy there. So had our paths diverged he did things I wouldn't do, but
Mhm.
he's, but he's, things I would sort of regret I didn't do. So, but we're still very, very close friends, and that's why he asked me. Actually, he's doing the pilot for a series, and I would not normally say yes to something like that, but because it's Tim, I absolutely said I'll do it, and it's actually been good.
So when you were directing that first episode that you got on Sopranos, what was your prep like? Like, what was your approach to the script once you got it?
Well, I mean, really no different than anything else I had done. I've always sort of approached everything I've done. Really, this is sounds like, like an exaggeration, but it's not. I always treated everything I did, including the crappy little science show for kids. Um, I always approach this at, well, I'm going to make this the best version of this that's possible to make, that I know how to make, the best version. So I would, so with in television, I always treated every episode to the degree possible like a short film. The caveat with that is that you have to know and understand the style of the show, because you can't just go off on new direction, and or you or you'll be gone very quickly. Um, but I had a good I had I think a pretty developed idea. God knows I waited long enough to what a series style was. I could, like a writer who can imitate the style of a writer, but write something different. But you kind of see. So it was like that. I mean, New York Undercover. It was very easy for me to understand how they shot it, and I think Timmy did the same thing. That we just I said, okay, I know how they do this, but I'm going to put my own spin on it, and that's kind of what I did with The Sopranos, or too. I mean, I never really felt like I was a television director, because I didn't do enough network. I wasn't indoctrinated by the network demands of
Mhm.
how you shoot things and so on. I never adopted that. I wouldn't. I I was lucky to get shows where they just didn't say much to me. New York
Mm.
Undercover, they left you alone. Really, I mean. I always said that New York Undercover was like the bastard stepchild of Law and Order. It was just ignored. You don't have anything to do with it. We recognize it, but we don't talk about it. And so it kind of felt like that. And some of the things I worked on, even in network, they just left me alone. I remember it was really very lucky. Spielberg had a brief series called Brief Life for a series called, uh, let's see, what was it? Uh, it was LA Cops on the Street. It's funny, I've even forgotten the name of it for now. Um, it was, but they left you alone, and they had money and they left you alone. And even X Files, they never said a word. I mean, I just did my thing. I met with Chris Carter and Anthony, us the guys that created it, and I understood the style, and then I just worked within the style. But I would always try to put my own spin on it, and I would say that worked. I mean, that they would always ask me back. They liked what I was doing, because I guess, recognized. I like to think they did, that I was doing something more interesting and still within the confines of what the style of the show was. So that went very, very well, and I could have made a good living just as a network guy, but I got lucky with. Sopranos came along. HBO was a non-entity. Nobody talked about it. They did sports, kind of cheesy late night, softcore porn sort of thing, and so that worked out. I mean, none of us thought it was going to be. I mean, nobody that I knew who worked on the show thought it was going to be a success, that I ever talked to anyway.
Not a success. People still reference it and watch it.
Oh yeah, I know it's uncanny. It's because it's like a great novel. People are still talking about Dickens too. I mean, I think it's on that level. I think it's anytime a show continues to have a life, and very few do, even good ones. No, people aren't quoting lines from X Files. I
Mhm.
mean, uh, they don't even talk about it very much. I mean, a lot of people haven't seen it. The curious thing to me, and wonderful thing, is that what we did and what David created was, that it's gone through all the generations. Like I knew people in their I know people in their 40s who watched it recently and loved it, and then people in their 30s watched it, and then I met some people in their 20s and watched it, and then I was at a party not that long ago, and a woman said, "Yeah, my 14-year-old son and all his friends are watching it." And I was like, "Great." Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll get down to the 7-year-olds. I was waiting, but I don't think so. I think that that might not be
But
ideal for.
it's completely living on, like, you've been in with some iconic shows because you also worked on Boardwalk Empire as well,
Yeah,
right?
that was a great job. Yeah, that's actually, of all the series I worked on, that was the most gratifying for me because The Sopranos yeah, David had a very narrow bandwidth of things that he thought were acceptable from the directorial standpoint.
Mhm,
But Boardwalk was, to me, was a great. I
mhm,
still think it's one of the, if possibly the most handsome show that's ever
mhm.
been on the air, and I just loved working on it. I loved all the actors and Buscemi and Michael Shannon, and it was. And my friend Tim Van Patten was the producing director, so I was just given complete freedom. And HBO had, at that time, a very different HBO than it is now, have money, and they just, let us run with it, and it was a great experience. I really did love working on that show.
I wanna ask you this question, like, compared to because that was the beginning that all those shows changed everything, changed the game, like, made the way for
Correct.
what we're seeing now.
Yeah.
What's the big difference you see between, like, those shows from, like, the late '90s and early 2000s compared to right now in 2025? Like, what is different in productions and writing and
Well, I mean, I really kind of, it's a good question and a legitimate question. I would say this. I mean, I'm now working on something that is a good representative of what you're asking about. I
Mhm.
didn't. Uh, I did a couple of things too but they were sort of a little bit off the main path of where things are now. I would say, I mean, a good example is this show I'm working on now. Um,
Mhm.
uh, it's there's Apple's involved, and then there's another group involved that's not really a studio, and they've never done much television at all, and we're struggling just getting them to approve a location, which the producer said would never be an issue with regular studios, but this is a relatively inexperienced group, and I would say that although we're not really experiencing it myself exactly, although the budgets are very tight. Like there's like no forgiveness. Uh, was urging them to push the schedule so that the writers had more time because they really needed it, and they wouldn't budge. And that's different. That kind of line in the sand over which they will not go is a new thing. I mean, studios used to be, they were much more like interested in the quality of the work. And if the quality of the work was going to be sacrificed, then they would reluctantly agree to something. I don't get that impression now especially from talking to friends of mine who are doing more work in television than I am. I mean, I am very lucky because I don't uh, have to take those jobs. I mean, I don't. So I'm not experiencing it exactly. I certainly felt pretty free in this. I had we haven't gotten through the edit yet, so we'll see. But on the way I shot this show, Tim and I had a lot of conversations about the approach to it, and we're both trying to stay true to that, and I hope the other directors will. But so I don't know how this will turn out, but I do know from multiple conversations that the budgets have become non-negotiable. This is the money. Tough luck if you can't do it for that. Figure it out. And that was not the approach. So I would say this, that the difference is that the studios used to care about the quality of a show and I'm sure there are exceptions to what I'm saying too, by the way. But the I would say there used to be a feeling of that what mattered was we're going to produce a great show. And yes, it cost more than we wanted. I mean, God knows Boardwalk cost much more than they wanted to spend, but they had a great show on their hands. I think that idea does not seem to be the norm now. It doesn't seem to be in the majority. This is the money. That's it. We don't care. Yeah, okay, you have to cheap out on that. That's the way it is. We don't care. So I would say there's less. I think, look, I mean, if this costs me a job, fine. I don't really care. The truth is, I mean, I really don't. I mean, I just, I'll work when I work, I love what I do, but I don't want to
Yeah.
work on something where, uh, I would like to avoid situations where there's no interest in the quality of the show only. And is it for this budget? And if it's not, then we're not going to make it, and no, you can't have any more. And no, you can't push the writing in order to improve the scripts because we don't care. We just care about the bottom line. So I think that's a big change. That's a radical change. And I think the danger is, although, there's still good things made, although a lot of it's in Europe now, uh, that the danger is that everything will become mediocre, and that we'll be in that world. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but
But that
that's,
explains why you have so many generations going back to the work of the '90s and the 2000s because
I
it was
think so.
quality.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, the shows look beautiful. They're daring. And so, I mean, again, there are still shows that uh, do attempt and sometimes succeed I mean, so there's still quality out there, but I think there isn't this excitement about everything that's happening. It's not pouring out like it was in that period. And I think you're right. I think when I recommend shows to people, things to look at, I usually talk about movies, all the way back, as you know, from
Mhm,
from the silent era.
mhm.
I still believe that's how I learned. I mean, that I did not go to film school, but I went to my own film school, which was I looked at every film I could afford to go to, and this was pre-video. Forget streaming. This was like there wasn't even VHS at that time. So, if you wanted to see a film, you went to a film festival, and I think I once said, it's probably an exaggeration, but I was thinking of that over that few years that I was finishing college, because it took me a while to get out, that, I saw like close to 1,000 films. And now that may not be true, but that's what it seemed like. Cause I would go to 3 or 4 films a week, uh, and fortunately there were film festivals and there were interesting, uh, films being even made by the studios in those days too. So, anyway, but yeah, that's how I learned. I think that's, to me, that's what I'm always encouraging the students that I have spoken to, that they watch more films. That's how you learn. You see,
100%. Like, what you were saying is that was me in my teen years in middle school, the cinephile kid. I got my
right?
first paid gig in the industry. I was a movie reviewer for MTV, and the reason I got it was because I happened to be at a networking event that Women in Film had, and I was a volunteer, so I would just run around, and I had all this bubbly energy, and it was a casting director happened to be there, and she goes, I see you at every event. She's like, "How many movies do you watch a week?" And I was like, maybe about 7 to 10." Like, I don't watch TV, I
That's
just
great.
movies. And she was like, "What? Would you come and audition to be a movie reviewer?" She's like, "You're watching all these movies anyway." And that's
That's
how I got my first gig. I truly believe in that. I always loved cinema, and I just yeah, there was a period actually, it was the HBO shows, it was your shows that got me into TV because I didn't watch TV. Like, people would name different shows, like, I remember when Seinfeld was out and stuff like that, I didn't watch it, I was in the cinema.
Yeah. Well,
I
that's it. Yeah.
watching I wasn't watching network stuff.
Well, that was the HBO slogan, right? It's not TV, it's
Yeah,
HBO, and
yeah.
that was the big change. And I say now, the proper slogan now would be, it's not HBO, it's not movies, it's TV, and just calm down and take the budget, and that's it.
Oh,
Uh,
no, that's well, because it was such a great brand, I mean, like, you knew that on that Sunday night you were gonna get something extraordinary.
well, I think a lot of people now, even now, I think you're sort of feeling in some quarters pushback against being able to stream everything at once. I mean, I think there are a few shows that only you have to wait till the next week, and I will say that was something exciting about that.
There
Particularly when The
was.
Sopranos was on, I mean, people were. I had a wonderful photographer. Actually, there's a couple of pictures, photographs behind me here.
Mhm.
Named David Leventhal, wonderful photographer. He shoots. These are all like models of. I like them because that was my first directing gig, was directing my little toy cowboys when I was like 5 or so, and that's what
Oh,
those
wow.
are, those pictures. And, but anyway, he was a photographer I really admired and I had met by chance, and, when we were doing The Sopranos, he said, "If you can get me a VHS of the episode before it airs, I'll give you, some of my photographs." And I said, "Okay." So I managed to I don't know how I did it, but, I don't even remember. Sure, it was highly illegal, but I got him a good VHS of the show so he could watch it before the show was on. Why he wanted to see it before the air, I have no idea. Maybe just to one up his friends, I don't
You
know,
like
but
bragging rights, because that was
yeah,
the fun
bragging
part.
rights. Yeah,
Watch
totally.
it,
So,
and you go on Monday and be like, "Oh, how did you see it?" And if you had that friend who didn't watch it, you could tease them, "Ah, you missed out. It was amazing."
right. So my bragging rights are I have these photographs, that I probably couldn't afford now, but
Oh,
anyway.
that is so cool. So I wanna ask you this, which do you prefer, TV directing or film directing?
Well, I would say pilots are a lot like film directing, because you're inventing the style, you're doing the cast. Ideally, you're creating the style of the show, you're hiring the principal crew, the
Mhm.
DP and the AD and production designer, ideally, and costume, all those players. In the best of all worlds, they're very similar. I mean, I still like film. I haven't made one in a long time. I'd like to make another one. Working on something. Maybe that'll happen. We'll see. But I am interested in that. But and now with this change in television, I'm not sure how much I want to do pilots. I have to see what they are. I've got one actually. I'm supposed to read today. Uh,
Mm,
so we'll have to see. If there's something there for me. But I like them both, and I like the process. I mean, I guess the couple of times I've done features, it's also nice to be able to just stay with something and develop it and work through all the tiny details and stuff. And you actually have enough time with television, especially now, from what I can tell, you don't have enough prep time. I mean,
yeah,
I didn't get the job I'm just doing. I didn't get enough prep time because the scripts weren't ready, and they weren't ready because they needed to push, and they wouldn't push because they were backed into a certain line in the sand that they wouldn't budge on. Um, so I didn't have a script for a while, and that's tough. So um, I was I shot list everything I do, beginning to end. Like by the time I'm shooting a pilot, I wasn't doing a pilot this time, just in a couple of episodes. Um, I have shot listed the entire episode. Ideally, I usually have to work weekends too to finish that, but that means like every shot is planned. Doesn't mean it doesn't change, obviously, because you get there on the set and you think, oh shit, the door isn't where I thought, or something. Or the actor says, well, I'd rather sit.
yeah.
Occasionally you'll deal with actors who have very strong opinions, and that's always challenging. Jim Gandolfini just wanted to sit. I guess if you carry around that much weight, you just want to sit. But
Yeah.
most actors are, especially the English actors, but most actors are willing to do, to uh, listen to the director. So I would say features are that's more expected than in television because but pilots are very similar. That's a long-winded answer. I think I'd
Okay,
be hard
so
pressed if I got a great script to make a movie. I'd probably over a great script to do a pilot. Probably do the movie just because I haven't done that many. But the great thing about pilots is that if the show is successful, they keep paying, so that's not a bad thing either. So
yeah. So let me ask you this. So you love you approach them kind of equally. There's you're what I'm hearing from you is there's really not a difference to your approach on directing a versus directing a feature film.
correct.
S-
Not
It,
really. No.
yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah. So let me ask you about actors you've worked with. Is there anyone in particular who's your favorite actor you've worked with, or is it wrong for me to have you keep?
So now, yeah, be careful not to insult
I
some
know
actors
I
I
don't
work with.
want to insult
No,
anybody.
I can give you a I can it'd be easier for me to mention the ones that come to mind than
Mhm.
my favorite. I mean, because sometimes your favorite isn't like the lead, or maybe even be just some incidental character. Um, well, Steve Buscemi, I love working with. He's a wonderful man, a real gentleman, true gentleman, and Stephen Graham, who I just worked with again. I'd worked with him on Boardwalk because he plays Al Capone in Boardwalk,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
he's a wonderful human being and extraordinary actor. And having just worked with him again, it's like this guy is the real deal. I mean, he really is. Um, just trying to thumb back through the file. I liked working with Michael Shannon. We got along great, and I mean the whole gang there. Shea Wiggum on also on Boardwalk. I mean, I'm going back to the fountain there just because that was such a great experience. You know, I, I you know I guess all of the Edie Falco, of course, is fantastic and a
Oh,
wonderful human being
yeah.
and a truly great actress. Jim was a complicated guy to deal with, but he's a
Mm,
great actor. He was,
yeah.
I can, I remember standing on the set once. I was and and having this thought just floated through my mind. I was watching, and I was standing about as far as I am from that wall, like 6 feet from him, and thinking, "Oh, this is I'm actually looking at a great actor, not a good actor. I'm actually
Mm,
looking at a great actor, and he's right there." It'd be like back in the day, like going all the way back into the 30s or 40s or 50s or whatever, looking standing that close to Henry Fonda or any of the
yeah.
great actor or Gene Hackman, more going into the 70s. It was like that, especially because the writing was so extraordinary, too, and so that added to the experience. But so yeah, he was great. I mean, I should stop because I'm going to not name the people that I would normally name if I spent some time thinking about it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, there's so many that and yeah, there's so many. It's probably one of those things where you can't really think about it. You just have to just kind of they'll bub up as we're talking. I'll throw some more names in there. Gretchen
Yeah.
Mol is one. Gretchen
I
Mol
can
was great.
I can see in your face how much you love Boardwalk. Like when you talk about it, you just
Yeah. Well, it was such a great. Well, hang on one second here. My phone started talking to me. Uh, the no, yeah, it's true. I mean, I really loved working on that show and just the experience. I know that it was hard for some, and I mean, definitely not an easy show to do. But no show is really. But it was. I felt such freedom, and you know, uh, I also did a pilot that I really loved working on called Get Shorty, which sadly nobody saw. Well, I think
was it
I think
from the movie Get Shorty?
it was no, it was from the novel. I mean, the original movie was based on the novel. This was more. This was certainly more similar to the novel than the movie was,
Okay.
which was a
Okay.
little bit cartoony. I liked it, but this was more deadpan, and it was on this network called Epics or something. And so, as a sad commentary on it, nobody saw it because nobody could find it. Uh, that's the remains the. I'm looking back to who was in the original movie. Yeah,
Mm,
I think I can't remember. I can't remember uh, if I mean, we had Ray Romano and Chris O'Dowd, and
mhm.
but just people. I remember Ray saying one day, "Can anybody find that? I was trying to start to watch it last night, and nobody can find it." So it's kind of unfortunate because it was actually a really interesting series, and I have to say, a guy named Davey Holmes wrote the script, and it was a lot of fun to do, and I really felt a great deal of freedom on that, and would happily. I mean, I've shown parts of that, scenes from that in a class because I just think I was given again a lot of freedom and I had a great relationship with the writer, and so even if I had to compromise, it was no bigger a compromise than you making a feature. When you have a studio saying we want this, and it was just such a good experience, and I'm so pleased with the pilot and the series is interesting. I think it's worth it, but nobody's watching it yet, as far as I know. Maybe six people or so, based on the residuals. Um, anyway, but yes, sorry that
Do you
was the.
No, no, I love that. Do you feel like now, because if I have to compare then versus now, do you think now it's just more restrictive? Because you keep saying over and over again how you had this freedom
Well, I
to
think
just
yeah,
to really
the
express yourself and really be a director, you know?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I mean, I think you have to have a script that that in, inspires that. I mean, uh, yeah, I mean, and so that's part of it is finding scripts that really excite you. And I mean, when I mean, usually, I don't feel like I have to work hard to think about how I want to do something if the script is good. It just generates those thoughts, very quickly. And so I think it's finding really good scripts. I think in the new version of television, um, certainly I feel it on this episode I'm doing just because certain restrictions that I think dictated by the budget and the finance and the strict sort of adherence to this finishing date and line in the sand. It's I think it's challenging at best uh,
Mm,
to feel that the work is compromised, and so yeah, I mean, I think we'll see as I move forward, but my impression is it's harder and harder and I'm hearing this from friends of mine more than having it as my own experience yet, uh,
mhm.
that it's more and more difficult to find exciting, daring scripts
Uh,
because the watchword is not let's do something interesting and different and daring. Let's do
right.
something for this budget, and we other than that we don't care. And but again, as I say, I'm sure that not to offend those studios or producers that are trying to work within this new framework. They're still, I'm sure that good things will come out, and there are still good things being made. But I
Yeah.
think they're harder to find. I don't get
Mm,
as many uh, really fascinating scripts as I used to, and I mean I still get scripts, but they're just not always as exciting or whatever. And I think too, I mean, um, it's just the luck of the draw. I mean, I agreed to do a couple of things that, in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have done, but they
mhm.
seemed at the time, I remember thinking, well, maybe I can make this work, and that's never a good way to go into something. Ideally, I mean, um, and and two, it depends on who you're working with. Honestly, I mean, it really, I always say, you have to kind of, I mean, when early in your career, you're glad to be working, believe me. I
Yeah.
was the same way. You
Yeah.
just say, yeah, good. I just say, yeah. So,
Yeah, you're
uh,
excited.
yeah, it's just like I'm getting to direct and somebody's actually paying me to do it. That was a big thrill. But, if things go well, you start getting a little picky. And I was very lucky because it took me a long time to get in the door, but once I was in, as I say, I got kind of things moved quickly and I was having a blast and I was working on things that they were kind of basically leaving me alone. And, and then The Sopranos happened, as I said, and that just changed the game. And um, so, uh, I mean, I haven't, I'm sort of meeting now the restrictions that we're talking about, but I'm hearing from, anecdotally from a lot of directors I know and people I know just in the business, not just directors, but crew that these that there it's a different time, and so I mean, I haven't ruled out trying to see if I can direct in Europe, but I just haven't uh, you know broached that, and see if there's any. There may be a little bit more freedom there, I don't know. But you're right. I mean, I think it's really as a director, you want to feel that you've been hired for a reason, and that reason is you do a certain kind of work and that they respect that and therefore they want you to be able to do that. And I think um, I have had not in this current thing because my friend Tim is there and he's kind of overseeing it, and so I don't feel that way at all. But I have done things where a couple of things, especially one where the uh, they wanted me to direct it, but then they wanted me to be a different director. And once we were in the game, it was wanted me to not they wanted didn't want to hire a different director. They just wanted me to be a different director. And I was like, why am I here? This is
Yeah.
how I work. And
Just yeah.
if that's why you hired me, why don't you let me do it? But they couldn't wrap their head around that. So I mean, that's I would like to avoid that. Let's put it that way. And it's also, of course, it's great to work with people you know. I mean, it's great to work
Yeah.
with Timmy and I'm working with a cinematographer I worked with back on a series called Luck for HBO.
Mm. I
And
don't know this show. What was the series? Luck?
it was a David Milch series. He wrote it, same guy that did Deadwood. Yeah, and it had a very brief life. It was about horse racing, and unfortunately, it was a little too much to mix a metaphor. It's a little bit too much inside baseball. I mean, even though it was about horse racing, it was just such insider kind of dialogue and stuff. It had a great cast,
Mhm.
including Dustin Hoffman, and but it was yeah, but it just had a short life. Nick Nolte was in it, Michael Gambon. I mean, it was a really great cast. But
Mm.
but it was, but I met, so I ended up, I was very lucky because when things were going well for me, I was in a number of instances, feature directors who I respected asked me to come and work on a show. So in that instance, Michael Mann was directing the first episode, the pilot, and maybe the first two episodes. I can't remember. And he wanted me to come and do the episodes right after his, but I wasn't available, so but I still did it. But I think I had to wait another episode. And the same thing happened on House of Cards. David Fincher wanted me to. Actually, he wanted me to bookend him, so he did the first two episodes. I did the final two of the first season of House of Cards. And Spielberg asked me to do something, and so it's nice when I don't know. Nice is kind of a flabby word, but I mean it's very uh, encouraging when directors that you respect say, "I want you to come and do episodes on my series," like this. So that was great. That hasn't happened lately because it just hasn't happened. But
Because
that
you're the
was
director. You're the director's like.
that's what it felt like, and that was great. I remember Mike meeting with Michael Mann, and he started to talk about the style of the show. I said, Michael, I've been ripping you off for years. You don't have to tell me about the style that you work in. And so he was like, okay, that was it. He
It's so
came to
funny
one
that
scout.
yeah,
What's
it's so
that?
funny that you mention him because he's the reason I went to the film school I went to. He's a graduate of my film school, London Film School. And
Really?
yeah, and it was because of him that I chose to go there because I saw him I think I saw him on an interview. I don't know what show it was, but he said it was at the London Film School that he found his voice as a director. It was there, and I said,
Interesting.
"Okay, I have to go to that film school." And that's the whole reason I went
That's
there.
that's
And
so
we were
interesting.
trying
Yeah.
to find his student films, and we couldn't find them. I heard they weren't very good. Sorry, Michael, but I heard they weren't really good. So
Yeah. What?
I think buried that thing. But
uh,
yeah, I loved him as a director.
yeah, he's done some wonderful work for sure. I mean, we work in an entirely different kind of style, but it was fine on what we did. Didn't matter. He mixes lenses in a way that I don't tend to, but he's so good at it. What can you say? And I really liked him. I mean, we got along very well. And one of the things I noticed is when directors like that hire you, they leave you alone because uh, they know what it's like to have somebody staring over your shoulder. So they're very respectful of directors. At least that was my experience with those and those guys. I mean, they were just like, do your thing.
Well,
So
it sounds to me like they really respected you as well. I mean, especially when you're saying somebody another one of my guys that I love, David Fincher, the fact that he was like, "You can bookend what I started." That's such a compliment. Like, that's trust.
well, yeah, I felt that way. A friend of mine uh, was the had mentioned my name to him, and that's how I got in there. And so, it's yeah, it is nice, and I was a big admirer of Fincher as well. So his style is pretty easy to imitate, even though I did something slightly. You can't help but put your own spin on things, but
Yeah.
it's still within the framework. It still belongs in that world. So,
Oh, I wanna ask you this. Okay, if you could remake I like to say reinterpret instead of remake, but if you could reinterpret any film from cinema history, any movie, what's
wow,
the one film you would just love to remake?
wow, that's a
Reinterpret,
really
interpret.
yeah, reinterpret.
Yeah.
that's uh,
I know. Every time I
uh,
ask somebody that, their mind races because I know you're like me. You've probably watched a zillion movies and
well, I do. There is one, and I know people. This is sacrilegious, but as a guy from Texas,
Mhm.
I would like to. Well, there's two, but one in particular, the Last Picture Show, because as much as I really love that film,
Yeah.
I love that film,
Yeah.
but nobody in that sounds like they're from Texas. Nobody, or HUD would even be a better example. HUD
Right.
would be, I would read, which was based on a McMurtry. Now I'm just reading McMurtry's biography right now. It's a great book, and it was called Horsemen Pass By. That was the novel that HUD was based on. And I've
Mm.
actually thought about, would that be something to try to approach? I mean, Tommy Lee Jones in the lead of what was HUD, as the grandfather figure would be great because he's the real deal. And that was a bunch
Yeah.
of Hollywood actors. I mean, it was a Hollywood director. I mean, Peter Bogdanovich. I mean, look, it's a wonderful script.
Yeah.
Ben Johnson's great. Jeff Bridges is great, but
Mhm.
nobody seems like they're from Texas. I mean, Jeff Bridges comes closest. I think was it Timothy Bottoms that played the other character. Is that right? And but it's
Mm.
but they're not. It's a it's a it's a it's like a shadow government. I mean, it's sort of it resembles what it could be, but it's not for somebody from Texas. Different generation, but still, it doesn't have the ring of authenticity. And yet I love the film. Don't get me wrong,
Right.
I do love
Right.
it. But you asked, so I mean that would be one, and HUD would be another. But I mean, because I can only think of films that I think that I really like. Uh, much as I love this film, uh, and it's one of the first films I really loved as a kid, is Shane. I don't know if you've ever seen it with Alan
Oh,
Ladd.
I've seen it.
It's a Western, but as a guy from Texas, a kid from Texas, that was high on my list. And again, there's some, I really do like that film, and it's just kind of a Hollywood film. But
Mm.
I always wondered what it would be like if you could, make it with a little more authentic, although there's some really, really gripping and very real. It's probably the single best gunfight ever filmed because it's the
Mm.
most real, and it's just one shot. I mean, it's more like it would be, and the guy just falls in the mud, and it's very, it's just so sad and pathetic what happens. And
Mhm.
so but uh, I, but in reality, if somebody approached me with those, I might say no. I mean, I was asked to direct the pilot of the series Fargo, and I turned it down because, again, one of my idiotic decisions based on the money I lost. But I didn't want to follow the Coens. I just thought, Jesus, I mean, this is just
Right.
such a great film. I just don't want to. What would I do? And I have to say, I think they did a great job. I mean, it was very well done, and I didn't feel offended by it. But I just felt like following in their footsteps. I just thought, I don't know how I'd do that. I mean, I just feel like I'd be. I don't know. So unfortunately, I turned it down, and maybe I want to. It's in that wagon load of regrets that I have behind me. But um, yeah, I mean that. But it was because I just thought. I mean, it's just a fine film. I'd
Yeah.
feel cheap doing that, but they made it work. So
Yeah, and the series is different than the film that they did anyway.
that's
The
right.
tone
That's right.
is different. It's
That's right.
completely different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But
But
yeah,
I could understand what you mean, though. It'd be like me trying to do a Michael Mann film. I'd be like, "Absolutely
yeah,
not. I would never touch
yeah. Would
anything."
you remake, Heat? I mean, it's like
Sure.
no, no,
Love it.
no. No,
Never.
or the Insider, which I think is a great film,
Yeah,
maybe his
that
greatest film.
that was that's like actually, that's a little bit above Heat for me because it was that movie that I was just like his direction in that, like, his blocking was just so amazing, and I was just like,
Oh, it's
I've
it's so
truly fell
good.
in love with him on that film, and that's why I said I said, "Whatever film school he went to, I'm going," because
Well, I don't blame you. That's good.
I
I'm
have no
actually the
problem.
producer. The producer on this series I'm working on was a producer for Michael Mann. And apparently he's considering making a sequel to Heat, which strikes me as a mistake, but
Don't do it.
no,
Mike, I don't
it's
know how to live your life, but don't do it. It's
no, it
just
makes
perfect just the way it is, you know?
yeah, I know it makes something new that's great, but
Yeah,
anyway, he's he's not asking my opinion, so
yeah.
but,
Nor mine. Nor mine. That's funny when I was in film school, he had done, what was that? Miami Vice, but he did the film.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
he had invited some of us students to go, and I was one of them. And, it was so funny. I actually ended up walking the red carpet behind him, and I was like, "Nobody cares about me." But I was just so happy to be in his space and in his orbit. He just, like, was helping us students out, like, "This is what you can do someday." And we're like, "My God, Michael, we love you." But yeah,
Yeah,
he
he's
was our inspira my inspiration, our inspiration,
yeah,
so
he's the real deal. So,
yeah. Do you have any passion projects, like anything, like, you've been holding on to that you really wanna do?
well, I mean, years ago, I worked on a story about a high school in Texas. Not my experience, but
Mm,
kind of an earlier generation. And I might go back to it. I mean, I don't know if anybody ever makes something like it. It's because it's a pretty. Uh, the idea would be to shoot it in Texas with real people from Texas because and you know, obviously some real actors, but also some. I think some of the roles could be handled by non-actors. To make this kind of period film, but see if one could do it uh, on a uh, shoestring. With even though it's period. And of course, I
mhm,
know that the first thing people say is, "Well, why make it contemporary?" It's like, no, it's not about the way life is now. I don't know how
mhm,
life is for high school kids now.
mhm.
It's not anything I relate to because I don't know anything about it. They have a much tougher road, I think, in some ways. Although it doesn't, whatever generation you live in, it's always got its issues. But it does seem monumentally more complicated. Although I guess, like every generation, we're still fucked up. It doesn't matter what the world is
Yeah,
like. But at that age, it's just a difficult age. But yeah, that would interest me. I did speak a while back to a producer who's from Texas who was interested, and but then I've been doing other things. So uh, I might go back to it if I can figure out a way to maybe make it a little tighter and a little bit more saleable. We'll see. But that interests me for sure. And then I'm working with my producer and 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 his wife, who's also a up and coming director, um, on a project that would shoot up here where I live, and that's would kind of again, I think could be a low budget ish uh,
mhm.
film. It's not really a horror film. It's kind of a sort of a ghost story in a way, but not really. I mean, it is, it isn't. So but that's something we're working on now, actually. So, I mean, if that's something that we all end up liking the script, then I would try to do it up here as what I did on my summer vacation, kind of film,
Yeah.
so we'll see. I mean, those two interest me, and then I just always have an eye out for, is there something interesting in television? Because I do like working in television when it's good and when I like the kind of limited scope of a pilot. It's shorter than a feature, you know, and
And you're great at it, so of course you should keep doing it. I mean
well, I enjoy it for sure. Well, thank you. But I really do. I mean, I partially did this job recently. Well, I did it because of Tim Van Patten mainly and Stephen Graham. But, and, it's, and I did it partially to say, do I still like doing this? Because the last couple of jobs have been tough, and I just thought, well, let me see if I like it. But the answer is yes, I still do. I mean, when it's good, it's very enjoyable, and
isn't it it's so much
and
joy when it all comes together, right?
yeah, no, I mean, it's a very good cast. Not to slight him. I mean, Leo Schreiber is the lead, and he's an extraordinary actor, and I've done it, worked with Liv a few times because I did the pilot on a damage, not damages, on Ray Donovan, and I did the reboot of when it moved to New York. They asked me to come back and direct the reboot, so I experienced there with Liev, and so it's that project is interesting, really interesting, and um, so we'll see what happens with it. I mean, uh, but I didn't do the pilot, so and Tim's done a wonderful job. So there's not as much once you go back and you start doing episodes, unless it's Boardwalk Empire, you know,
Mm.
um, there's less money, and especially nowadays, and less tolerance for I mean, I think back to X Files. I remember on X Files, I kept shooting stuff because I kept thinking things that I thought could make the episode better. And I remember getting a call from the producer saying, he actually literally said, "You think you could finish up sometime? I mean, we really kind of need to." I think I was on the 14th. I think I was,
God.
and I think it was like it was supposed to be like either 9 or 10 days. I think I was on day 14 and I was shooting something. He said, "We'd really like for you to finish." I said, "Oh, okay." But they were so casual about it. You would never hear that now, of course. It'd be like they would have pulled the plug on day 9 or 8 or whatever.
Yeah.
But that was a different time, and they just had a lot of money. Said it was like, as if they had a shopping bag filled with money, and when I would come and ask for something, they'd say, "Well, here, go take care of it." And, but those days are over.
That's too bad because, we miss having those kind of, like, epic, must-see, gotta talk about shows. I mean, they come so few and far in between, you know?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And this was just an episode. It wasn't even the pilot. It was just I just had an idea, and they were just like I don't know why they left me alone, but they did. They were kind of not paying attention or something. But anyway, so
Yeah, so I always end my episodes with asking my guests to give us a quote, right? It's creative quo, so we want a creative quote. So if you
oh,
wanna impress the audience with some of your wisdom, what do you wanna share with us?
well, it's what I said to you. I think. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the most fundamental thing I can say, which is in the beginning, say yes to everything so that someday you can say no to everything.
Mm,
That's what I would say, just someone offers you something, do it. You have an idea for something, do it. You want to make a short film, do it. You want to, even if it took me 4 years to make that film because I kept running out of money. I'd
mm.
go back to work and then I'd go back and I regretted I didn't do a time lapse of the making of the film so I could have watched the lead actor, gain weight and lose it and have his hair grow.
Yeah.
It would have been an interesting little short. But, no, I would say that. Just say yes to everything to get started. And then little by little, you start being able to say no. And if things go well. But it's not an easy business. And especially now, I think it's not. And so I say that knowing that times were different when I was coming up. And I was lucky. And, in, I guess there's all kinds of theories about luck, you know. Um, so, and I think I'm probably an example of that. I was always very prepared, and I think that's the other thing is that certainly you're going to work in television. Read it, take every episode seriously, and make the best film you know how within the confines of the demands of the series. And that was always still is my approach. It's like, what can I do that fits with this show that still is in some regard my vision, if I can use that word. It's a little bit pretentious, but and and uh, and I have been very gratified over the time, and I still, to be honest, to be completely honest, I never quite believe it, but I've heard it enough, so there must be some truth to it. But I've had people for years say, "I always know if it's an episode you've directed," and uh, I don't, I question that, um, but it's always said with a great deal of sincerity, and I think, well, good. I mean, if I'm doing something that somehow comes across as notable, somehow deeper, more interestingly shot, something, I don't know I really don't know what it is. I don't know. I'm not being falsely modest. I just don't know. But because I couldn't imitate my style, do you know what I mean? I don't know what my style is. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, somebody once, I mean, I've had this said more than once. Said, "Oh, you move the camera a lot," and I said, "You know what? I don't. I move the actors a lot, and the camera goes with them." But I hate when I see a camera. One of the things I've stopped interviews, and you're not trying to do this, so I appreciate that. I stopped an interview because they had the camera dialing back and forth, all
Uh,
during the interview. And I was like,
yeah.
wait a minute. I said, why are you moving the camera? I'm just sitting right here. If I'm that fucking boring, let's just stop the interview. So either stop dialing or let's just
Yeah.
stop the interview. And they did. They kept filming and they stopped on. But I don't like the unmotivated camera move. That's something I am
See, I think
very
that's style, though. I think that's what people mean. I think, like, from your work, what I admire about your work is that you know how to block according to what's going on with the
right.
actor, other than just setting up a shot and making the actor fit into it.
Yeah.
And that's what I admire, and that's what I love about your work. So I think that's a signature thing for you. Like, you really understand camera and actor and how to connect
Well, that's
them really,
nice. Well, that
because
thank you. Yeah.
not all directors know how to do that. I mean, there's a lot of great directors, but some of them kinda lean more into the camera. Like, "I have this cool shot, and I'm gonna do here, and I'm gonna put this here," and you can tell that everything else has to fit into that vision.
Hmm.
But with you, you kind of it's an architecture. You kind of build everything around what the scene needs.
Well,
And
that's a
yeah.
high compliment, and I appreciate it because I probably because of my I don't know. My father was a theater director. I mean, amateur, local, and so on. But I realized after he passed that he really was talented. He could have been a contender. I mean, he was really talented, and I don't know if some of it came from that, but I did kind of come up. When I was very young, I wanted to be an actor, and fortunately, I recovered from that desire. But but you know, I'm very happy to hear you say that because I do take a lot of. I love positioning the actors in a way that tells the story in some
Yeah.
way, that
Mhm.
says something about the story, and that then from that the camera does its thing and participates in that. And um, I just this thing I just did had Zazie Betts in it, and
I love her. Yeah.
yeah, she's a lovely human being, and and a wonderful actress. And that being able to and working with the cinematographer, John Grillo, who shot the episode of Luck that I mentioned. That's the
Mhm.
first thing he ever shot. He was the camera operator for Michael Mann, and then he became that was my
Okay.
episode was the first time he was a cinematographer, and now I just got to work with him again after all those years, and he's wonderful. And but just being able to stage things with Zazie and or with Stephen Graham, although Stephen mostly was just sitting, but it's just I get great pleasure from that, from that, figuring out, like they said, like architecture, what is the architecture of this moment? What is this moment asking for? And how can this shot say that? And, you know, I, the things I'm most proud of are when, when the shot, when I can laugh at the shot or whatever, just because it's like, yeah, that works, I mean, uh, and it's can be very different. I mean, it'll get shorty. Actually, I sort of referenced that when something we were did on this thing I just did. Um, we did there was a scene where Paul Sparks, who's one of the actors in Boardwalk Empire, the one
Mhm.
with the funny laugh, that guy,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
uh, and that so and where this is the pilot for Get Shorty, and where he's trying to get away from some guys, and I had a whole long shot list, and I just said, let's just roll and just let him do these things, but we'll never cut. Because I have this theory that I sort of believe in, which is that every time, I mean, Hitchcock proves that this is not correct. But the
Mm,
way I think of it is every time you cut, you kind of release a little tension. So I shot this sequence with him trying to make an escape, and we didn't cut. So whenever he ran in the bathroom to get something, we just panned him. We saw a mirror so I could see him in there. We just, he would look at something, and I'd look somewhere, and I'd pan over there, and then he'd come into the shot, and then the subsequent scene right after that is just very quiet and very still. And that sequence to me, I love because it's two entirely different techniques that both serve the story at that moment.
Right. Right.
and the funniest murder I've ever filmed, because as you know from Boardwalk and Sopranos, I've filmed a lot of murders. Between that and
Yeah.
sex scenes, I got the all the bases covered. But there's a moment where Paul Sparks is shot, and his all that happens is his head just goes back, and there's every time I see it, I just start laughing because it's just so pathetic. It's just such a uh, and it happens on a line which Davy Holmes wrote, which is wonderful. He's trying to save his life by saying he's going to get these killers. He owes them money, involved in the film business, and the last thing he says is, "I'll get you points on the back end," and he shoots him, gets shot right at that moment. It's like it's great, clearly Davy Holmes taking out his fury on every time he's heard that line. So, you know, uh, you know, uh, it's funny how writers do that. I remember Terry Winter uh, in Boardwalk. There's a line where said to an actor who he was struggling with, and just before the actor is shot, the character is shot. The line is, I think, "You brought this on yourself." And knowing all the backstory, there's like, oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
There you go. But anyway, so but yeah, but thank you for that. I doubt I really that means a lot to me that you said that because
Yeah, no,
I know you mean
I'm
it.
just telling you the truth because you know how I feel about you. I adore you
Yeah,
and I you're super talented and because of you, I didn't give up. Because
good.
I was at a point where I was just feeling so overwhelmed and crushed, like just feeling like I lost my mojo. I lost my voice. So I can identify with what you were saying, how you did a project to help you figure out, do I really still love this?
Yeah, yeah.
And
And you just
I
did, right?
yeah,
And
and I just did thanks to you because it was your advice. You were like, you said go back to that cinephile moment. You were like, "Go watch this movie." I remember you texted me. You're like, watch this movie." And I was like, "Okay, okay."
well,
I was like,
good.
figure out how to get that mojo back, how to fall back in love, because that's why we do it. We just love the storytelling. And
Yeah, that's right.
sometimes the politics and the business and all that stuff kind of takes you away from it.
It's hard to hold on to, and I admire that you were able to get it back. And you know, and I don't. I mean, I just hope you don't stop. You can just keep doing it. I
I'm
mean,
not. And if I hit that bump in the road again, I'm gonna ask you to have lunch with me and give me
it's a
some
deal.
more motivation.
Okay. It's a deal. I'll be happy to do that.
Just text you. I'm like, we're going to lunch. Are you in town?
All right. Okay. Well, it's just a train trip away, so let me know.
Exactly.
But I hope I don't get that call for a good reason.
Well, maybe be to celebrate.
All right. Well, that's different. That's
Yeah,
fine.
that'll be different.
All
Yeah.
right. Great. Great. Well,
Well, thank
thank
you
you.
so much, Alan, for your time, for your talent. I hope this show makes it. I want to see this new thing you're working on. I know it's
Yeah,
draining with the car driving, but I hope
that's
you
true.
finish.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thanks for this. This is a real pleasure. It's great to catch up and it felt like another lunch to me. I assumed that it wasn't a lunch alone.
Yeah.
Since I can't see anybody else out there, it just felt like you and me talking. So that's great.
This was so great. I can't wait to see you in person again. We gotta make it happen soon.
Well, that's fine. I'm around now. Just 2 more days and then I'm here.
Oh,
So
you're only home for 2 more days?
no, no, I've got 2 more days to shoot whenever they tell
Oh,
me.
2 more days to shoot. Oh,
I'll go
okay.
back. I'll do that, and then I'm home, and I got nothing imminent. We'll put it that way. So great.
Okay, don't be surprised if you get a text from me then.
It would be a pleasure. It would be a pleasure. Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
See ya. How do I do this?